to the west, to the east side of the city, and our business moved from the west side of the city, from Washington Street, where we were founded, to Water Street, where we then lived for many, many happy years. Other things were happening in the city, particularly in the period directly after the Civil War. There was a guy from Chicago who had been in the Civil War. He was a bugler, and he had become famous as a young man, a bugler in the Army, because he had written a tune, which we still use in the Army and in civilian life as well, and down by the World Trade Center only a decade ago. He wrote taps. His name was Ed Norton. He did not clean sewers. He was never on CBS, and he was never a movie star, but his name was Ed Norton. And he went to California in the late 1840s because he could heard that you could make a lot of money there in a short period of time. He grew to be middle-aged, and after the Civil War became a tinkerer and an inventor. There was an outfit out there called Hills Brothers. Hills Brothers was a wholesale grocer. And as a wholesale grocer, they were trying to figure out how to get butter fresh from San Francisco to the Klondike Gold Rush people. They had lots of money up in the Klondike, but they didn't have fresh anything. If you could get an egg there, you could sell it for $5. In a world where an average New Yorker with a decent job was making $3 a week. $5 for an egg. So if you could get fresh groceries there, you were in. Mr. Norton invented a vacuum can. The Hills Brothers started making a lot of money shipping fresh butter to the Klondike. Later, they tried shipping other things. Packaged meat, smoked hams. They finally got around to coffee, and the vacuum coffee can was invented at that time. In Pittsburgh, there was another wholesale grocer. The guy's name was Arbuckle. His first name was John. He had a brother. The firm was Arbuckle Brothers. And he was trying to figure out a way to sell his groceries wholesale, but retail. Not just to taverns and hotels, but to sell his groceries to a new kind of store that would sell groceries to people. But in order to do that, he figured that you had to package the stuff, because selling open barrels of grain, open barrels of coffee, open barrels of rice, okay, selling things this way, they got contaminated. The mochas got mixed with the javas. That's how the first blend got invented. It was an accident, probably. We don't really know. But my guess is there was a barrel of coffee from the Arabian Peninsula and a barrel of coffee from the Dutch East Indies, and using the scoops fast, it got mixed up. And finally, they couldn't call it mocha and they couldn't call it Java, so they created a blend. It's mocha and Java, lady. It's wonderful. It had to be wonderful. They were the only two coffee-producing countries at the time. Everybody still makes it. It's rarely from Java. It's rarely from Yemen now. But everybody still makes it, except we're going to have to stop in about another 6 weeks, because New York and every place else can't get Yemen coffee right now. So we're all going to be trying to figure out ways of whether we can get by using coffee, which is the granddaddy of Yemen coffee, which is Harar coffee from Ethiopia, as a substitute for Yemen coffee in our mocha and Java blends. And somebody's going to stand up and scream foul when it happens, but don't worry, it's New York, I promise it'll happen. In New York, while Mr. Arbuckle is trying to figure out a way to get coffee fresh in a package, a guy invented a package. And we all know it. It's the brown paper bag. He was a Brooklynite, and he invented what he thought was a great way to sell peanuts in the circus. That's what he was inventing it for. And if you go to Barnum & Bailey's, you can still find, they still sell, okay, these little brown paper bags. They have stamped on them a picture of an elephant. Sometimes it also says the word jumbo, and you're not sure whether they mean the elephant or whether they mean the peanuts. But remember, in peanuts as well as in olives and pistachios, super colossal are this big. Okay, so watch out for jumbo on peanuts, pistachios and olives. He invented it for peanuts. Okay, cute idea. But there was another New Yorker whose name was Osborne. He was in the coffee business in Brooklyn. There was no bridge, but he was there, and he was roasting coffee. It was 1864, and he put together an item called Osborne's Celebrated Java Coffee. First coffee put up in a package. We were happy. We were in Manhattan. Gillies was out there with our little barrels, with the scoops, with the beans, and this guy's putting it in a clean package that nobody sneezes in. He went broke, of course, because he tried to sell the coffee nationally. If you think about it for a minute, it's very tough to sell a product nationally when there are only 37 states and 11 of them seceded 2 years ago, and you're busy trying to get them back. You may get a customer in Atlanta, but they're not going to pay the bill. So he didn't do well. But as the war was ending, the guys in Pittsburgh tried it themselves, and they tried it with a little bit of a twist. That is, what the Arbuckles did was they knew that the paper bag wouldn't keep coffee fresh for long. It would only keep it together in a package. They developed the idea of creating like a sugar slurry, by kind of like making sugar syrup, by taking a little bit of water and sugar and putting it in a pan and melting it. Okay, they discovered if they were very careful and they mixed it with a little bit of isinglass, which is a, you might know that word only from the song Sorry with the Fringe on Top from Oklahoma, but it was a material that was a powder that could be turned into a liquid that could be turned into a fabric. In the song, it's isinglass curtains. And, but you could, what it did was, it would melt and then harden again. So you could put coffee beans in it when it was in its molten state, and then this roasted coffee, and then take it out and let them kind of drip dry like in strainers. And the isinglass and the sugar combination would dry around the coffee, and what you got was a coffee bean that kind of sort of resembled a jelly bean. They weren't pink, red, and blue, but it had a coating on it. Okay? Today, of course, we know that in the candy industry they have these things called pan coaters, which they use to put the sugar on the raisins for Raisin Bran, and they also do it to make M&Ms, and they also do it to make jelly beans. But in those days, it was a novel idea. What happened was the sugar coating kept the coffee fresher longer. And so long as you didn't store it in a damp place, okay, it was pretty decent for a couple of weeks. And the Arbuckles created a brand, first brand in coffee. It was called Ariosa. A-R-I-O-S-A, nobody knows what it means. All of us who study coffee history take guesses. Okay, maybe it meant A-R, Arabica. Maybe it meant A-R, Arbuckle. Maybe it meant R-I-O, Rio. That's where the coffee came from. Okay, maybe it meant any number of things. Maybe the A at the end stood for Arbuckle. Maybe at the end stood for something else. Maybe it was a girlfriend that John was dating. I don't know. But Ariosa was the first national brand of coffee. He shipped it out of Pittsburgh. He had a wonderful, wonderful salesman that he had in Texas. Remember, this is now the period just after the Civil War. And America was moving west, and John Arbuckle put up this coffee, 48 one-pound packages in a wooden crate. Corrugated cotton hadn't been invented yet, but it was coming soon. And he shipped them to St. Louis and St. Joe in Missouri, the jumping off places, for coffee going out west on the covered wagons. And you know, in the Midwest at that time, as today, we have this small open area known as the Great Plains. You can walk for days, drive for days, certainly a day and a half, never see a tree, never see a hill. But people were planting themselves there and trying to make homes. They made sod homes mostly, and they got wood to build with wherever they found it. And they found it in Mr. Arbuckle's coffee crates. And as recently as the Dust Bowl era in the 1930s, you could still find furniture, doors, window shutters, made from old John Arbuckle coffee crates. You can still find them in antique stores all over that part of the country. You can still buy them. They go for hundreds of dollars a piece. I promise you they're not real. They're all reproductions and forgeries, aged in the Midwestern sun and rain, but the people will be happy to take your money. There is, as an old Connecticut man who made his fortune in New York, Mr. Barnum said, a sucker born every minute. He was in every business except coffee. He's the guy who, in this town, bought a consignment of white salmon that he couldn't sell. Nobody would buy it, but he had gotten it cheap. So he put up huge signs that read, genuine Alaskan salmon, guaranteed not to turn pink. Sold out in an hour. Not a coffee store. B. Fisher and Company was founded in 1861. Nobody knows who they are, but they were the largest roaster in the city in the 1870s and the early 1880s. And they made their home down on Greenwich Street, one of those coffee roasters who were on the lower west side of Manhattan. And their building still stands. It's a magnificent structure. It was still a coffee factory when I was a boy. It was the coffee factory at that time of Joseph Martinson and Son. And I was in that factory when it was a factory. It's about an 8 or 9 story brick building built in the post-Civil War period. It's got magnificent brickwork. It has since been kept up extremely well. There's a small restaurant in it now that you may know called Tribeca Grill, which is on the shipping and receiving level. And if you go in there, besides having a great meal, and maybe you get to see De Niro,